everybody. Welcome back to Searching for Political Identity. I'm your host, Brian Escow. Thank you so much for being here. I just had a really great conversation with the authors of this book. Two guys. I mean, I made the joke to them before we started recording, but so I couldn't bear to repeat it and pretend like it was organic. But I said to them, I never hosted two people at the same time. This was my first three-way, and so the fact that they were both named Guy is just hilarious. So never had two guys before. Okay. Well, they're both professors. They're both Israeli Americans, and this book is really good. And there's really nothing more relevant to my search. I know there's a lot of people like me, I guess American Jews who feel a little torn about their identity. Grew up on the left, politically, with not a very strong religious identity. As time marches on, as you mature, as current events play out, this book is very much about that dynamic, and also about the dynamic, frankly, mostly about the dynamic between the complicated relationship, as the subtitle says, between Israeli Jews and American Jews. So it was a super conversation. It's a follow-up to the one I had 6 or 7 weeks ago with one of the guys. When at that point I had read half the book, spoke to him. The episode is called "What Does It Mean to Be Jewish?" End of August. If you want, I do recommend you listen to it. It was really good. But that's at the end of August. If you want to look back and find that one. And now that I finished the book, I hosted both of them. So great chat, very relevant considering it's October 6th, and we're a day away from the 1-year anniversary of October 7th. So if you're wondering where that conversation is that you were expecting, if you watched my last episode, in the intro, I said, before I have this conversation, I'm going to have one with a guy from Twitter about aliens, both illegal immigrants and outer space aliens. The truth is, Friday afternoon, I had to blow him off. I said, dude, I'm really sorry. I didn't have enough time to prepare for this interview. I got off of work late, and it didn't happen. So we'll do that another time. But this was an important conversation that I was not going to miss. So do I have anything else to say about it? No. Go buy their book. Please buy their book. And please share this interview if you think it's interesting. I mean, the subject of it ultimately is, how will American Jews vote in this year? That can be summarized. In fact, I think I'll make that the title of the episode. Because when you boil it all down, you can ask the question, why do American Jews always vote for the Democrat 70% of the time historically? And given what's gone on this last year in Israel, and what's likely to happen, and what's gone on in response to the events in Israel this year on American universities, will American Jews do something different? I'm doing something different, and my complicated relationship with my Judaism and with Israel is part of the reason. It really is. But it's not the only reason. So and this conversation really explains it. So thank you so much to both guys, and thank you for being a listener. Really appreciate it. Let's see, what is my next conversation scheduled? I think I have one scheduled. Oh, it's a couple weeks out, but I'll find something else to do before then. If not a guest, then I'll do a solo episode. So thank you all, and have a great week. Bye-bye. Guys, welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yes, Guy G. We spoke probably 5-6 weeks ago at this point, and it was a wonderful chat. And listening back to it in preparation for this reminded me how nice it was, and how meaningful it was, and how meaningful the book is. And it's just very deep and meaningful to speak with both of you today of all days. So we'll get into current events maybe, and what role, if any, they played in you writing this book. But we're going to talk about this book again. I'll hold it up in just a second for people to look at. It's extraordinary. It took me longer to read than it should, because as you said, Geji, last time, it is very easy to read, and it's not long, but it spiritually and emotionally and psychologically deep for me, and it took me a while. These are concepts I've been wrestling with for a long time, so we can get into all of this as we go on. But let me hold up the book. Boom. Where's my camera? Right there. It's an extraordinary piece of work, guys. So Guy G, I'll start with you. How long did it take you to work on this book together?
I think it took us about a year, give or take, and we're about 4 months deep into the project when October 7th happened.
Okay, interesting.
And it was really funny because I called Guy up and I'm like, do we need to rewrite the book? Is our central premise going to be completely destroyed? And he was very wise to say, no, everything we predicted in the book will probably happen. And guess what? It stayed the same. And we finished the book probably 3 or 4 months after October, if I'm correct. And here it is.
Guys, see, you want to add anything to that?
No, it's look, the book is tangentially about the Arab-Israeli conflict. It's primarily about the Jewish people that finds itself in a unique situation where it's, for the first time in its history, it's located only in two places in the world. And so it's about the relationship between these two Jewish tribes, let's call it. And part of it is the Arab-Israeli conflict that one of those tribes is engulfed in. But
Right.
so this attack, of course, plays a role in the relationship between American and Israeli Jews, but in a similar way to previous conflicts in which Israeli Jews found themselves in previous wars. So it's a replay of
Right.
dynamics
The dynamic that you
before.
laid out. Right. Yeah. Guy G, itching to say something?
Well, no, history doesn't repeat itself, but it always rhymes. This book is about the complicated relationship between American Jews and Israel, but it's about much more. It's about how Israel serves as a metaphor for the Western world as it grapples with two tensions. One is globalization, and the other one is tradition, nationalism, and religion, and tradition, nationalism, and history and religion. Yeah. So our book is about American Jews and Israeli Jews, but it has a much wider theme that people who are not even interested in Israel are still going to be interested.
Yeah, the logic as to the argument as to why Israel is so viewed so negatively among the West these days, there's a lot of lessons there for anyone, even if you're not interested in Israel, if you're just interested in politics and really. So
can I just
yes, sir.
add to that? There's this bewilderment about why people are so obsessed with Israel. Why are people obsessed with this conflict, for example? This conflict, by the high estimate, has killed 45,000 Arabs, by the high estimates. At the same time, you have a conflict in Sudan that killed 115,000. You have a conflict in Yemen that killed 300,000, also Arabs, also Muslims. In Syria, 800,000. And you don't see demonstrations in the streets and blog posts and podcasts like this about those conflicts. And Arabs and Muslims are being killed there in much greater numbers, and no calls for about genocide. So there's this bewilderment. Why? What's different about this conflict? And one answer is anti-Semitism. That when Arabs do it, it's fine. When Jews do it, it's genocide. But the other is what Guy was pointing to, and that is Israel is a metaphor, or is a symbol. It's an emblem of two concepts that have become, for whatever reason, problematic for many people, many elites in the West, and that is nationalism and religion. It's a country that fuses nationalism and religion in a way that used to be not problematic at all 50 years ago, and has become very problematic today. And I think beyond anti-Semitism, which is, of course, part of it too, I think that's the reason why there's an obsession with Israel.
Yes, as you write in the book, the left, the political left in America, has become increasingly uncomfortable with nationalism and religion. I think you write that it's, pardon me, going back to Soviet propaganda against the West, and that having crept into academic ideologies today, this critical theory. So is that a direct line, or is it more than that?
So I think there's definitely a connection there that has its roots in a geopolitical situation in the 1970s and 80s. But to give them, academics, leftist journalists, etc., more credit than simply being fed a line by people who are long dead now in the Soviet Union, there is an internal logic in left-wing thinking that is very materialist, very class oriented, that has a fundamental disagreement with the concept of nationhood. They think that religion and nationhood are these tricks, these distractions.
Opioids.
Oh, exactly. It's but both of them are opioids of the masses.
Right.
Whereas what should hold a real hold on your consciousness, on your behavior, is your class, is your material situations. And they, the cabal at the top, are trying to distract you from that real thing with all sorts of fake things like religion and nationalism. So I think the roots of this attitude are as old as Marxism, which long preceded the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was a big engine for Marxist thinking, but I think it goes deeper than the Soviet Union.
Right. And I don't think anyone would really argue that the critical race theory stuff that I studied in my final year of law school just a few years ago, which really set off this journey that I'm on, is an offshoot, if not literally, then just intellectually, of Marxism or anti-Western, anti-property. You can lump in this idea that the traditional American values, they just don't fly with that way of thinking. And so as I search for my political identity, obviously it's a deeper journey than that. And it's, this push and pull. I grew up in a Reformed Jewish home, very progressive home with cousins who are quite conservative. And only since talking to Guy and reading your book have I really realized what's really going on here. And a lot of this is this spiritual, genetic, religious question that I'm on, which is, am I leaning back towards religiosity? So yes, I would say that on the left in America, we see a rejection of nationalism. We see a rejection of religion. It's been obvious for so many years now. And I was an atheist and I'm an agnostic. I guess I would say I'm an agnostic now, but I would probably, gun to my head, say I believe. So I don't know what has gone on in my life that I've had this transformation, but it's certainly relevant.
I can tell you that I read, I think Guy sent me this tweet from a student at Columbia or somewhere in the Northeast, and she said she was so unfamiliar with the mainstream of Judaism, of Orthodox Judaism. She was so unfamiliar with Orthodox Judaism. All she knew was Reform Judaism. And when she started becoming more traditionalist, having more of a spiritual sentiment, she had this real anxiety, this fear that if she wanted to become more religious, she would have to convert to Christianity, because she didn't think that kind of spiritual religiosity and conventionalism, that there was even a flavor of Judaism that could accommodate it, because all she knew was what you were talking about.
Reform Judaism.
Yeah.
Right. So she thought, that's all there is in Judaism. It's not deep enough for me. I got to seek it out elsewhere. And so the point of your book, one of them, is that there are two tribes, and I'll do a little exposition so you guys don't have to do it all and we can kind of just be chatting. But two tribes and just correct me after I do this, but two tribes, one Eastern European, and they used Reform Judaism, which is just a vehicle for assimilation, first in Europe and now in America. And you write in the book, if I remember correctly, which I know I do, that the price for a Reform Jew to live peacefully, safely in wherever place they live now, is shedding their traditional Jewish identity, the waning of their identity, as you say. And then the price of Israeli Jews, the other tribe, to live freely in their homeland is to live by the sword. So two tribes, tension, complicated relationship. That's the dynamic of the book. Also, you talk about in the book the complicated relationship between American Jews and the left. So a lot of dynamics here. You guys want to, Guy G, you want to jump in?
Well, let's start with the first one. These are big topics, very complex.
Yeah.
So our book asks a very simple question, and that is, what is your primary identity? Every single one of us has multiple identity, right? On Saturday, I am a Florida Gator fan. On Sunday, I'm a fan of the Miami Dolphins, right? We struggle, we change, we have competition between various identities that we all hold dear, and they're all contextual, right? So when you hang out with your friends in the yoga class, you're a yogi. But when you hang out with your friends in tech politics, you're a Republican or a Democrat. American Jews and Jews all around the world have to struggle with a question and that is, which of your identities is the most salient to you? What we argue in the book is that Jews who live as minority citizens in a place where they are the minority, oftentimes selected to be French, to be American, to be German, prior to their Jewish identity. So the saliency of one's identity will determine their social norms, who they hang out with, how they act, how they vote, how they think, right? So we know that from social psych. The Reformation movement gave Jews an invitation to become equal citizens in many parts of Central Europe, later in the United States, and that gave them the path to really become the type of Jews that we see today in the United States, ones whose religiosity is secondary to their national identity and their political identity.
And I can just read the epigraph for the chapter in the book, chapter 12, that deals with Reform Judaism in America, has the slogan of Reform Judaism since the 1880s or so was, be a man on the street and a Jew in your home. And that is the mission and the kind of creed of Reform Judaism, and that is, Judaism is a private issue. It's not a public thing. It's your own private thing. Keep it at home.
It ain't your primary identity in this country.
It's not your public identity. Okay? Whereas in Judaism, since the time of Moses, it's a public identity. It's a national identity. It's a communal identity. You live a Jewish life throughout the day, and that mindset has been responsible for the Jews' isolation, humiliations, persecutions. And the mission of Reform Judaism was to allow Jews to become normal Germans, normal French people, normal English and American people. And so the little chapter heading, the subheading in this chapter is called Reform Judaism in America, Transition from Jewish Identity to American Identity. And in that respect, Reform Judaism has been very successful. And what you described about yourself is a perfect example. You had a very...
What a success.
Yeah, look, the success is that you've lived a very safe life in America. You've been accepted among your friends and your institutions and on the street and your neighbor. You're just a normal American. And the price has been what you described. You lived a very shallow or ephemeral Jewish life. And you didn't attend religious services. You didn't belong to a Jewish community. You don't have you don't belong to Jewish organizations or have Jewish friends. You're a regular American. And like I said, because Reform Judaism allowed you and worked hard to allow you to pick your American identity and keep your Jewish identity private for once a year for Passover. I do that.
Yeah. So everything's good. And this works really well. In Europe, it worked really well until the Nazis came to power, right? So this deal, right? I mean, you had Jews in the government of Germany during World War I. We talk about it in the book, right? I mean, Jews made it. The success story of Jews in Europe was immense until World War II, and we know how that ended up. In the United States, American Jews, it worked perfectly for them from the 1900s when everybody came from Russia, before that Germany, until now, until October 7th. And suddenly American Jews, for the first time in their life, their children are going to Brandeis University or Yeshiva University, like the most Jewish campuses in America, and they're facing anti-Semitism. And Jews are not allowed to walk on the campus of UCLA and Columbia. And for the very first time, this guarantee, the promise that said, hey, if you keep those funny hats off your head, and if you don't act Jewish, you can just be an American and succeed and nobody will mess with you. For the first time, this is being challenged. And I think this is why this conversation is so salient, so interesting right now as we speak.
Yes, a year ago, just tomorrow. This is crazy. So, do you guys, either of you want to say more about the being college professors, about what's gone on the last year? Guys, see any insights to offer?
So, what's been happening for those who haven't been following is that in elite universities, Jews have found it, in the prestigious, whether the prestige is earned or not, universities, there's a very, because like if the pro and anti-Israeli divide in America goes by left and right in broad strokes, the strongholds of the radical left in the United States happen to be universities, and the more elite, the more radical left. And the same goes for the establishment media. So, and radical groups like Black Lives Matters and other affiliated groups. So in those sectors, including these elite universities that have traditionally large Jewish populations among the student body, the response to this really medieval massacre on October 7th came as such a slap in such a shocker to the Jewish students, because they expected, oh look, Jews are victimized, they'll be embraced. We, the Jews, the Jewish people, will be embraced. And instead, it unleashed this torrent of celebrations, and it completely was this whiplash for Jewish students and faculty there, in the sense that they saw these people as their, I mean, not saw them, but they were their friends and they were their political allies. They were fighting together against mean Republicans and against pollution and against global warming and against
oppression from their point of view.
Oppression, yeah, or immigration, whatever.
Yeah.
So they were together, and all of a sudden, when we are, when our brethren are
the fault line arose.
Yeah, all of a sudden they found that, wait, these people, something is wrong. Something doesn't match here. Either these people who I thought till yesterday were good people are not good people, or that my impulsive identification with these poor Jews who were burned and massacred and raped in Israel, maybe I'm wrong to feel an affinity with them.
Right.
One of these two things has to be wrong.
And this is, as you write in the book, a litmus test, if you will, a problem that is unique to Jews on the left. No other group.
Let me jump in and summarize it real quick. American Jews have always been at the forefront of social justice. Always. We're talking about the labor right movement, the civil right movement, the gay right movement, fighting Islamophobia. American Jews were always at the forefront of the social justice movement. And now, when October 7th happened, when thousands of Israelis or civilians are slaughtered, when teenage Israeli girls were gang raped and in the most evil way, when hundreds of hostages were taken, the social justice movement turned its back on American Jews. And this is creating a real crisis, political crisis, identity crisis within the American Jewish community. How it's going to translate into the 2024 elections, we'll know more. We can talk again if you want in less than 30 days. But this is a major crisis.
I'd just like to add one caveat. The one topic that American Jews have not taken the lead on is the fight against the isolation, the fight against the state of Israel, the fight against Zionism. In that, it is Christian Zionists who have been the most vocal, the most open in the fight against what's called the BDS movement. And I think in that respect, you see the roots, the early roots of this discomfort, or this not knowing where exactly you are in this social justice movement, in the sense that the fight against this diplomatic anti-Semitism, Jews never felt comfortable, or at least not in the last generation or two, taking the lead there, and it was left to Christian Zionists to do that.
Well, guy, of course, because fighting the BDS movement is ironically enough embraced by the social justice movement these days.
Yeah.
So American Jews are a part, many of them, not all of them, most are not, but some. You are actually going to find a lot of American Jews who are involved in the BDS movement in supporting. I actually know many Israelis. Many Israelis on the far left are supporters of the BDS movement. They want to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. Crazy. But I mean, the thesis stays the same. Social justice movement, right, has always been a place where American Jews were very vocal and they had leadership in it. And nowadays, after October 7th, American Jews are really, really facing a question because, as Brian said, as we said in the book, there's a litmus test. Just social justice students on every campus in the United States tell the American Jews, are you Zionist or are you social justice warrior? You can't be both. And this is a real problem.
And by the way, one way you can gauge the level of discomfort of American Jews who are overwhelmingly on the left with fighting for Israel is that American Jews on the whole support Israel, no doubt. But you can gauge the support primarily in their financial their charitable contribution to Israel and to Israeli causes. By contrast, American Christians, they donate a lot less money to Israel and Israeli causes, but they're much more vocal on the streets, in the halls of government, in the press, etc., on Facebook. And so the difference is that the American Jewish support is very high, but private. You do it with your
makes sense, you know,
on the computer screen. You do it by sending a check. Whereas the American Christian support, because they don't have this anxiety, because they don't belong to the left, it doesn't cause friction with their friends on the left because they're on the right. So they can be much more open and vocal about their support for Israel.
Yeah, there's no question about their national allegiance, any of that.
Right.
Yeah. You know. So it makes me think of these two main things that you mentioned in the book that Reform Judaism gave up, and it feeds into why this dynamic is occurring. Reform Judaism sacrificed the concept of Jewish nationhood. I mentioned Jewish identity, as you write in the book. The traditional markers of Jewish identity start to dissipate, but the idea that Jews have always sought to return to Israel and have a nation there, and that they are the chosen people, as we talked about last time, Gaiji, these concepts are not necessarily frictionless with contemporary American culture. So what can you say about that?
You know, but as a great band Bonnie M once sang, by the river of Babylon, where we knelt down, there we wept, right? We wept for Zion, right? Jews have always yearned to come back to Israel. Every Passover, we say a blessing next year in Jerusalem. In our book, my favorite, you know, it's so funny because when you write a book, you have like favorite children, right? You have favorite chapters. Right. My favorite, and Brian, I would love to turn the mic on you in a second and get your opinion about the chapter that differentiates between the version of Judaism in the United States and in Israel, right? When you go to a Reform synagogue in the United States, they have different prayer books than Jews everywhere else in the world. And they took out anything that has to do with, you know, how Jews are different than everybody else, right? Which is celebrated in Judaism. It's part of the prayers. Chosen people, right? They took out the chosen part of that, and they took out the yearning to go back to Israel, the homeland of the Jewish people, and they replaced it with a lot of concepts that are reflected in the Democratic Party, such as, you know, inclusivity and equality and all that. You know, text, so literally changing text.
Fascinating point. It's a fascinating point. Yeah.
So let's turn the mic. Let's turn the mic on you for a second, Brian. When you read that, you grew up in a Reform family, right? And the version of Judaism that you're familiar with is the one we describe in the book. When you read that chapter, I would love to get your thoughts on this.
Well, are you going to the salad bar concept as to the differences? Okay.
Salad bar concept.
Sure. Yes, this idea that, well, I mean, Yeah, I don't have an experience in an Orthodox Jewish life, and the point I think is that you can be Orthodox and not be religious. So the opposite of Orthodox religious is not necessarily Reform. You can, so as you say, the salad bar metaphor here is in Israel. What Judaism is is all these ingredients on the salad bar, and people take what they will, and that's their Judaism. That's how they make their Jewish life. But Reform Judaism is not that salad bar. It's just different. Like you say with the prayer books, they're not singing off the same song sheet. And so it is kind of news to me in a sense, right? I mean, even at my age, it's like a revelation. Even though I went to Hebrew school and even at the Reformed temple that I went to, I learned about the chosen people. Okay, so I'm like reconnecting with very young ideas that were put in me when I was very young. So I've become activated in a sense where I haven't figured it all out intellectually yet, but reading the book, talking to you guys, and seeing the current events, I'm one of those people who, in no small part due to current events with Israel, are shifting to Trump and shifting to the right because it just feels like I'm more home there. So I'm not really answering your question, but all I can say is I grew up in that milieu of social justice, like big, like enormously, powerfully strong. Like nobody, this book is no better for no one than me. So I'm wrestling with these concepts, and it was really interesting to hear you say that the void that was created by ditching these Jewish nationhood and Jewish identity concepts and letting go of that salad bar. You embrace the ideals of inclusivity, diversity, all that, which is great. But if it becomes your spiritual center, maybe, and that's where, you've got, it just made me think of the Jew haters, the classic Jew haters of the internet, like the Nick Fuentes, who say that Jews want to just go out there and change the world. Well, maybe it's a result, that criticism, that hatred is a result maybe of this changing internal Jewish dynamic. Maybe if Jews just focused on themselves and what their original core tenets were, maybe there wouldn't be such beef with these anti-Semites. I don't know.
I'm gonna give the mic to Guy, but he's probably going to tell you that people who want to change the world politically belong to a political movement. Typically, it's not on the right; it's on the left. The need to change the world and make it better. So maybe it's not because they're Jewish. Maybe it's because most of them are leftist. Guy.
Well, look, I'd say two things. First of all, you happen to grow up in a very unique Jewish society in that it is overwhelming. The component of Orthodox Judaism in American society is tiny. 10% of American Jews are Orthodox. That doesn't exist anywhere in any Jewish diaspora. Okay? In all Jewish diasporas, the Orthodox quotient is 30% to 60% to 100%. So the United States happened to be this Jewish community where you will be completely unfamiliar with basic mainstream Jewish ways of thinking that have been this way for 2,000 years or 3,000 years in what we now call Orthodox Judaism. And then to Guy's point about, and yours about the embrace of Democratic Party values in the American Jewish community, goes back to what Guy said earlier about identity. Look, we're human beings. We all need an identity of ourselves and a sense of community of who we belong to. And if Reform Judaism made one of its causes, one of its missions, to allow Jews to integrate into American society and assimilate and be normal by doing everything you said they needed to do, is okay, then now your primary identity and your primary community is not going to be other Jews. You're going to need some sort of ethical understanding of who you are and community of who your people like you are. If it's not going to be the synagogue, it's going to be some other group. And for American Jews, it happened to be the Democratic Party. These are their family. These are their values, as opposed to those outdated Jewish values and Jewish.
And this is where they live, right? And most American Jews live in New York, New Jersey, California, and Florida, right? And guess what? those are Democratic stronghold, not Florida, but really when we talk about,
Although
Palm
until
Beach.
recently, Florida too. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, but still, around Boca and Miami, it's still very, a lot of Democrats, especially in the Jewish community. But I will tell you one thing. It's really interesting because you hear a lot, Brian, you're talking about Trump and how he's like the enemy, right, of so many people, especially of American Jews. In the last month,
Well, I don't feel that way. I hope I didn't. I hope I didn't make it
I
seem like
know,
I felt that way.
no, I
We
know,
we all know enough
but
people.
no, but Brian, once you came out with your political support of Trump, you felt it, right?
Oh yeah.
So here's the thing: Trump gives a speech to the IAC. The IAC is the Israeli American Council, a really up and coming organization for the there are several 100,000 Israeli Americans like us, right? Like Guy and I, and Trump was there in DC in this huge conference. He was obviously the keynote speaker, and a lot of people in the audience were complaining about the fact that this felt like a Make America Great event because the people in the audience were so pro-Trump, right? It couldn't be a more pro-Trump room if you had to choose one. The next day, every single headline in every single mainstream media and all of Jewish Twitter was Trump is an anti-Semite. He gave a speech in front of this Jewish audience and he insulted them deeply because he said that if he doesn't win, Jews are to blame.
Yeah.
This shows you the strong difference between the two tribes, right? The two Jewish tribes. The American Israeli tribe, is overwhelmingly more conservative because Israelis are more conservative, right? Their relationship to nationhood and to religion is very different than that of American Jews. And of course, the American Jewish, audience, which is between, 70 to 80% Democrat, depending on the year, right? And it's always been since the days of FDR, 70% of Jews vote Democratic. They strongly dislike Trump. They strongly dislike Benjamin Netanyahu. And I think the relationship towards Trump is very symbolic of the key sociopolitical difference between the two groups.
And by the way, we wrote this book. I mean, look, we wrote this book long before the October 7th attacks, but it spoke to this kind of, not awakening, but to this kind of bewilderment of some American Jews who find themselves like that woman I told you about earlier, who thought she might have to convert to Christianity if she wants to become more religious, who find themselves moving to the right, but they don't know exactly why. They feel impulsively an admiration or respect or an affinity or sympathy for Israel, but they hear from all their friends and their media feeds and everything else that Israel is really problematic and genocide, and they feel that that's not true, but they can't defend it. They can't explain to the Israel critics why they're wrong because it's just something that they feel. But as you said about yourself, you didn't know all sorts of basic things about Jewish nationhood and Jewish history and the connection between the land and the religion. And so this book had one of its audiences was American Jews who don't know much about, because of their sociology, don't know much about their book, their history, their nationality, their identity, other than the Holocaust and the Passover Seder. They don't know much because they don't belong to a Jewish organization. They don't go to synagogue. And
we wrote it for you, Brian. We wrote it for you.
I mean, seriously. I'm surprised I'm not mentioned in the forward. But yes, well, I made that joke,
and they don't have anyone to ask because they don't have anyone because their parents or their friends or their rabbis are in the same boat.
Yeah, I made that joke and I kind of derailed my own train of thought, but it's interesting, Guy G, when you were talking about Trump being symbolic of the socio-political, or however you put it, dynamic at play here, because so many people, at least in my life, that are Reformed Jews who lean left, perceive him, and we can argue about whether that perception is valid or not, but perceive him as being on the right of all these cultural issues and being an oppressor for people who are oppressed in America. And so their instinct as people who have shed their religious identity and embraced a political identity, and they're on their left, and that's their family, and that's their identity. They have this very powerful, at least I'm thinking of certain people who I won't mention by name. Hi, Dad. No, very powerful reactions to Trump, the person who they view as a negative guy, not a good guy, just not a good guy, on personal to cultural. And okay, he's good on Israel, but that's not my primary concern, right? And so they, that kind of guy is not going to break for Trump, I don't think.
Well, of course not, because American Jews, we talk about this in this book. We gave the story of when David Ben-Gurion met with JFK, and JFK thanked him. He's like, Mr. Prime Minister, thank you that all these American Jews voted for me in the election. And Ben-Gurion didn't think twice, and he said, hey, dude, we don't tell them how to vote. They're Americans. It's like Jews don't vote based on Israel. And this is true today. If you look at every public opinion poll of Jews who are Democrats, and you ask them, what is the number one concern for you when you go out to vote? It's not going to be Israel. It's going to be abortion and gay rights, and
right.
all the
stuff.
bread and butter, all the bread and butter Democratic Party, right?
Because American Jews are, going back to what we were saying here, American Jews are primarily Americans, not primarily their Jewish identity is very shallow. Their American identity is robust. And so they're Americans who are on the left, and they vote exactly like American on the left who are not Jewish.
And this is why.
And the same is true of Jews on the right. If you ask them why they're supporting the Republicans, it's also not Israel. Israel will be number 3 or 4. Primarily, it's going to be the economy, the border, the Taxes, whatever it is that animates conservatives, free speech, religious freedom, and Israel too. But for all Jews, like all Americans, Israel is not the top 3 or 4 item.
Yeah.
So, if I put my political science hat on for a second, what we see is that religiosity is a predictor of political behavior and political voting, right? And Brian, you described yourself as an atheist, agnostic. It's funny, if you look at Jews in Buddhism, right? I think it's called the Jubist, right? There's so many. There are a lot of
I like that,
right? So you look at them. American Jews are. I said they're really involved in the social justice movement. They're also very much involved in the atheist movement, right? I mean, so the very low level of religiosity. Again, one of my favorite chapters in the book is why do Christian Zionists love the Jews? And why do American Jews are suspicious of them, right?
Why they fear them, yeah.
Why they fear them, suspicious of them. And what we argue is that ultimately American Jews, because they are on the left, on the Democratic side, they're suspicious of Christian Zionists for the same reason they're suspicious of Trump supporters or anybody else, because they vote on every single issue on the opposite side, right?
Right.
And by the way, that's how you can tell that the American Jewish fear, rejection of Christian Zionists is anchored in politics. Because you have the Christians are offering,
which is anchored in a lack of religion.
Well, in this case, yes. But you have these allies that are offering themselves, their love, their support to you, and you're afraid of them because they're on the other side of the political spectrum. By contrast, if you look at Christian evangelicals, you can see that their support for Israel and Jews is anchored in religion, not in politics, because they're offering all this love and support and embrace for people who they know are their political rivals.
Right.
So they're crossing a political boundary to offer themselves as allies to Jews because religion dictates it, politics be damned. Whereas American Jews, are stopping at that political border.
Yeah, or in other words, they feel more sociologically comfortable with the super woke professor who tells them that Israel is a colonial, terrible nation. The American Jews feel more sociologically comfortable with them than they do with evangelical Christians. It's ironic, but it's very interesting. It's happening.
Yeah, so God, or the lack thereof, such an important role in our development as a society, as a world. Either of you want to say more about that?
Earlier when you talked about, when you and Guy spoke about social justice and trying to change the world, a lot of it has to, if you look at religious education versus secular education, a lot of it has to a major difference that you'll find, and it doesn't matter which religion, is that religious education tells you, the student, at any age, that if there is a problem, that the biggest problem that you, Brian, face is Brian. That's the biggest problem. You have a crappy nature, crappy human nature, with you're lazy, you're selfish, you're a hedonist, everything else.
Stupid.
Stupid, yeah. So your main problem, the main problem in your life is you.
Right.
And that has to do with kind of religious values of all the monotheistic religions that stem from their insistence that human nature is bad. By contrast, secular, godless thing, or the opposing view of secularist mindset is that human nature is good. Human nature is noble.
Right.
And therefore, if there are problems in society, it's not because of me, it's because of the society. And
certain bad actors that need to be.
Exactly. And so therefore, to solve my problem, my own problems in life, I don't need to work on myself like any religious teacher will tell you, but I need to work on you two. Like you two are my problem.
On the system. The system is broken.
What an unbelievably clear, what a perfect and clear explanation of the connection between religion and politics, because the conservative ideology, these things that I've been wrestling with, I mentioned, so I come from this very progressive home, and I have a mentor who's not a conservative, although he's one of the people who has always voted left and shifted to the right. But when you find people who preach accountability, like a life coach or a fitness guy, that's the ethos of the conservative side. You take care of yourself. I have a note here, and it ties into the concept of nationhood. You take care of yourself. You take care of your family. You manage your property, and that is your job. And if everyone does that, of course, the system works. Like Bill Belichick, everyone do your job. So you can see the split here, where people on the left, obviously, they would say, of course, we're not eschewing personal accountability, but it is about being external about it, really, in a serious way. It's pretty interesting, guys.
And by the way, you mentioned fitness coaches. There is, I don't know if you guys are keyed into this, but there is this left-wing criticism of the fitness movement. They call them not fitness Nazis, but fitness fascists or something like that. Because first of all, it's judgmental, but also it does exactly what you're saying. Like if you feel bad about your health, or if you have health problems, the fitness coach will tell you it's because of you. Because you're not eating right. And the opposing view is it's because of the healthcare system, or because of the food industry.
Food system, right.
So there's, it really does.
Where do you shine the spotlight? Where do you shine the spotlight for introspection, or maybe it's not introspection, but of scrutiny? Where do you scrutinize? And exactly. The religious world, it seems that you're telling me, tells you to focus here. Very interesting. So we were talking earlier about, well, obviously we're talking about the two tribes, one in Israel, one in America, and how they interests have diverged so dramatically over the years. And I wrote down, it's why Israelis will argue that they must actually ignore American Jews in terms of how they operate as a state, because the interests are so, there's just so not a lot.
So let me pause you right here. This is a perfect timing. Last week, 200 ballistic missiles are launched at Israel. Right? The ethos of Israel is we can only depend on ourselves to protect ourselves. Right. And this is the psychology of a majority group. We don't need anybody else help. We're going to take care of ourselves. But in all actuality, Israel needs the support of the United States if it wants to really go after Iran's nuclear, arsenal and oil fields, and all of that. Israel needs the ammunition for its airplanes to sustain. Israel is fighting a war in Syria, in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Yemen, and in parts of Iraq, and soon maybe in Iran. We can't do this all alone. So in Israel, it's very, very common to say, hey, and I'm sure Guy feels that way very strongly, we'll take care of ourselves. But it's not entirely true. Israel is always dependent on the support of American Jews. American Jews, despite all, Guy, you can jump in a sec. Despite all of the differences despite all of the tensions between the tribe in the United States and the tribe in Israel, the story, and I think we articulated this very clearly in our book, American Jews were always very important to the state of Israel. The state of Israel was supported by people like Ralph Lowenstein, who we speak about in our book, who left everything. He was a freshman journalism student at Columbia University. He left everything in 1948 to come and fight in the Israeli Independence War. The money that came, the early political support that came from American Jews was always important, right? And the 6 Day War, Yom Kippur War, and later on. So the support of American Jews is always important. And I don't think anybody in Israel says, forget these American Jews, they don't count. What we do see a big difference is about what kind of country should Israel be. This is a whole big conversation, but this is really the conversation that led us to write this book. Guy,
the support of Israel needs the support of the United States. It didn't early on. In fact, the United States had an arms embargo on Israel until the Yom Kippur War. So Israel fought its early wars and struggled to survive despite the fact that the United States wasn't with it, but Israel found other global allies. But since the United States became Israel's major backer, Israel needs the United States. But the question is whether within the United States, who is the backbone of American support for Israel? In the past, it used to be American Jews,
right?
And over time, it seems to be that
Christian Zionists.
It's Christians. And the Jews are much more ambivalent, and so there's never this attitude of screw the American Jews, we don't need them. We do need them, we do want them, but there's a growing recognition that the American Jews have this identity conflict, identity crisis. They don't know who they are and what their relationship with Israel. But the American people, the biggest lobby for Israel is American Christians, not American Jews. And in this respect, it's interesting. You said something earlier about American Jews. You see that before the formation of the State of Israel, before the Holocaust, American Jews and American Reform Judaism was not on board with Zionism. They were quite hostile to it. But after the Holocaust, and especially after 1948, after the formation of the State of Israel, the leaders still saw the intellectual and ideological conflict between Reform Judaism and Zionism, Jewish nationalism. Kind of goes against many of the tenets that founded Reform Judaism. But there was a groundswell of support for Israel and identification and commitment to Israel on the part of Jewish congregants. And you had it's not a rebellion, but American Jews compelled the leaders of Reform Judaism in America to change their anti-Zionist tune, and even to change the prayer books to become less conflicted, to allow back some measure of support for going back to Zion and some measure of support for Jewish nationhood. Like if you look at American prayer books, Reform prayer books from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, they're more traditional or on these issues of Zion and nationhood than in the 1920s and 30s. So the American Jews, despite the leadership, came to the support of Israel. And I think now they're facing, American Jews and American institutions, religious institutions, are facing a similar kind of dialogue between the leadership and the people because I think, again, the people, especially now, after October 7th and in the face of what's seen on these elite campuses, they feel like you did. I feel a push to the right. I can't explain it necessarily, but I feel it.
Right.
And their leadership are saying, no, you belong on the left, on the social justice left. And there's this kind of dialogue, and we don't know where it's going to end up.
Well, we can talk about it after the.
Yeah, I look forward to it. I know we got to land the plane here, but want to thank both you guys for a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I just in this last few minutes, you've really put a bow on it of what your book is, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you just said it, Gaiji. From your perspectives, what kind of country should Israel be, given the identity crisis that you think American Jews are having and have been having, and the increasing conflicts in the world and issues that Israel is facing? Given that, and we didn't touch upon it too much in this conversation, but given that the center of Jewish life has migrated from America to Israel over the years, and that Israeli Jews have the majority dynamic, the bigger brother dynamic, as you write in the book, as opposed to American Jews now having the little brother dynamic. Given that the support for Israel comes from the Christian Zionists, what kind of country does Israel want to be? Who are they going to take their cues from, if they're going to take their cues from anyone at all? And I think the answer is they're going to take their own cues, and they're going to fight for their survival. And I've got a lot more to learn, and I've got a lot more to learn about the conflict, but it's clear where I'm shifting right now. So, gentlemen, unless either of you have any final parting thoughts, I'd be happy to hear them out. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks, bye.